Have you ever sat back and wondered why, even though our wind turbines are spinning at full tilt, our electricity bills still feel like they're being priced by a 19th century coal baron and taxed like a luxury item? It's absolutely absurd, and when you take a closer look, it's far worse than you might expect. But let's rewind a little. A few weeks ago, I did an episode about running costs of heat pumps, which got loads of comments. Thank you for that. But a huge chunk of the discussion wasn't really about heat pumps at all. It was about the spark gap, the massive difference between electricity and gas prices in the UK. Some comments were bang on the money, others not so much. So I felt it was important to do a dedicated episode to clarify some key points, because once you get behind the tariff, it's clear the whole thing is a jumbled mess. The cost of electricity in the UK isn't just about how much it costs to generate it. It's about the way the system is priced, the way politics and economics got tangled together, and a legacy model that barely makes sense anymore. Now, here's the thing about UK electricity pricing. On paper, we've got more renewable generation than ever before: wind, solar, and hydro. We can actually see how much is being produced in real time on our phones, but the price you pay on your bill doesn't reflect that, and there's a reason for it. The UK still uses something called a marginal pricing model, which basically means whoever's producing the most expensive bit of power needed to meet demand sets the price for everything else. Almost always that's gas. So even if 80% of the energy in a half-hour period comes from wind, you pay as if it were 100% gas. Renewables get that higher price too, and that cost ultimately gets passed on to you, the consumer. It's totally bonkers and completely backwards. This model was understandable maybe in the 80s or 90s, before renewables were cheap. Now, it's archaic, wasteful, and unfair, especially if you've installed a heat pump expecting cheaper running costs as part of a renewable future. And instead, you're paying gas prices to run a wind turbine in the background. That all makes very little sense to me, but it gets worse. Even if pricing were fair, UK electricity is loaded with levies, taxes, surcharges, and policy costs that push that price point even further. Some of them are well-intentioned, some of them are historic, and some of them honestly are completely baffling. So let's unpack what's in there, because this is where the spark gap really comes from. The current UK electricity rate per kilowatt hour is around 27.69 pence as a national average for direct debit customers under the January to March 2026 price cap. These policy levies collectively account for around 8 to 9p per kilowatt hour. That's roughly 30% of the unit rate. The good news is that this portion is set to decrease from April 2026 as the government shifts some funding away from bills. I'll come back to that shortly. The remainder of the unit rate covers wholesale energy costs, network costs, and supplier operating costs and profits. But let's take a closer look at what's bloating roughly 30% of your electricity tariff. Take VAT for starters. 5% slab console electricity, which is an essential service even when it's coming from wind or solar farms that paid off their bill costs years ago. That money flows straight into the treasury for general government spending, and it's not ring-fenced for climate action. Then there's the legacy policy baggage like the renewables obligation, still subsidizing old wind farms long since paid off, and feed-in tariffs paying yesterday's solar pioneers. Add in the energy company obligation, most notably Eco4, which has forced households to fund a scheme plagued by fraud, poor workmanship, missed targets, and sky-high admin costs that have too often failed the very people they were meant to help. Then there are capacity market payments for backup power stations that rarely run, and now nuclear funding through the regulated asset base, paying for Sizewell C, a plant we won't see electricity from for a decade or more. But at least there is some respite on the horizon. Eco is finally being scrapped, and 75% of the renewables obligation is being shifted to general taxation from April 2026. But in a country trying to electrify everything from EVs to heat pumps, loading electricity bills with all this extra fat feels completely nuts to me. It's like taxing gym memberships while complaining about obesity rates. Now here's the critical point for me. These costs do fund the transition. They help roll out renewables, they help upgrade the grid, they help support vulnerable households. That part definitely matters. But almost all of the costs are loaded onto electricity, not gas, which means the cleaner option gets punished. As a result, electricity ends up around 4 times the price per kilowatt hour of gas, even when the electricity itself is coming from cheap renewables. And I get it, politically, heavily taxing gas would be explosive. But right now, very little is being done to genuinely incentivize homeowners to electrify. What is the incentive behind paying £5,000 or more for a heat pump, only to potentially face higher running costs than gas? And most people want to do the right thing, but if they can't afford to do it because energy costs feel crippling, can we really blame them? And that brings us neatly to another part of the tariff debacle, the standing charge. Standing charges are the fixed daily fee you pay just for being connected, and over time they become packed with what the industry politely calls non-commodity costs. In the UK, the standing charge has ballooned. It's become a dumping ground for costs far beyond basic connectivity: network upgrades, policy levies, balancing costs, supply failures, and a lot more. Electricity standing charges now average around 55p a day, over £200 a year, before you've even used a single unit of electricity, and some regions push even higher than that. And because these costs are fixed, they hit low usage homes hardest. Efficient homes, solar households, and people actively trying to save energy. That's the exact opposite of a fair green system. And then there's the postcode lottery. In the UK, your electricity tariff varies by region, thanks to differing network costs that have been set up by Ofgem. For January to March 2026, households in North Wales and Mersey pay the highest unit rate at 29.09p per kilowatt hour, while Yorkshire pays 26.69p per kilowatt hour. The national average this quarter is 27.69p per kilowatt hour. Standing charges are even more uneven. Mersey pays a staggering 71.01p per day compared to the national average of 54.75p, while the southern region is lowest at 45.7p. These differences exist because distribution networks cost more in some areas. Rural or historically underinvested regions have longer cables and fewer households to spread costs over. Though I'll admit, I struggle to see how Liverpool and Chester qualify as sparsely populated or rural, but regardless of the justification, it still feels deeply unfair. So here's the reality of the situation in the UK. We're still paying marginal gas prices for electricity we never burned. We're paying inflated levies and 5% VAT that distort the real cost of clean power. We're stuck with a standing charge that's become a black hole for unrelated costs. And only partial relief from the autumn budget 2025 is coming, around £150 off the average bill from April 2026, with the deeper structural problems still unresolved. Which means that for homeowners looking to electrify, heat pumps, EV chargers, battery storage, there's a glaring policy contradiction. You're told switch to electric, slash your carbon emissions, and save money in the long run. But right now, this tariff structure financially punishes that choice. And for many people staring at their bills, the numbers simply don't add up. And because energy is so politically sensitive, you can't just blame the suppliers. This tariff structure is embedded in policy, regulation, and decades-old pricing mechanisms that simply haven't kept pace with modern electricity generation. Cheap renewables, priced as if everything still runs on gas, it's mad. And I appreciate that this is a complex problem from a government perspective. Balancing affordability, fairness, energy security, and decarbonization isn't simple. But electrification cannot succeed if the cost of electricity remains artificially and unjustifiably high. And if you think that's controversial, ask yourself this. Why would anyone switch to a heat pump when simply staying on gas still feels safer and cheaper at the meter? That question alone tells you everything about the scale of the problem and why smarter, faster reform is needed right now. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're still confused or just want to share your own energy bill horror stories, head over to the Renewable Heating Hub forums. And before you go, if you found this video useful, helpful, or just clarified a few things that didn't quite make sense before, then one of the best ways you can support what we do is by picking up a copy of The Ultimate Guide to Heat Pumps. You'll find the link in the description. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye-bye.